The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Well, pull up a chair, one and all. We're about to delve into another article of Bill Wilson's here in the book, Language of the Heart. Chris S. is on the line, as always. Welcome aboard there, Chris.
Monty, how was your week this week?
It has been a absolutely spectacular week. The weather has been just gorgeous here up in the Pacific Northwest. And got some yard work done and some weeds pulled, and the gnomes are all happy. All the garden gnomes are smiling. So it's been a great week. Really, really good.
Nice.
Yeah. So what are we doing this week, buddy?
All right. Well, as always, we are going through the articles Bill wrote for the Grapevine and maybe even some other stuff that is collected in the book Language of the Heart. And we're on page 287. We are getting up there.
Yeah.
This is segment 2, looking toward the future, and the title of today's article that we're going to read and discuss is called Leadership in AA, Ever a Vital Need. And this was written in April of 1959.
I thought there were no leaders.
Well, we'll find out. We'll find out just what he means.
What does he mean? Yeah.
There's like things in Alcoholics Anonymous that don't make a lot of sense.
I know, right? I know.
Like you got to let go. Well, how do you let go? You just got to hang on.
I know.
There's just things that just don't make a lot of sense, and this is probably one of them.
Yeah. All right.
So, all right, leadership in AA. No society can function well without able leadership in all its levels, and AA can be no exception. It must be said, though, that we AAs sometimes cherish the thought that we can do without any leadership at all. We are apt to warp the traditional idea of principles before personalities around to such a point that there would be no personality in leadership whatsoever. This would imply rather faceless automatons trying to please everybody regardless. At other times, we are quite apt to determine that AA's leaders must necessarily be people of the most sterling judgment, morals, and inspiration, big doers, prime examples to all, and practically infallible. Real leadership, of course, has to function in between these entirely imaginary poles of hope for excellence. In AA, certainly no leader is faceless, and neither is any leader perfect. Fortunately, our society is blessed with an amount of real leadership, the active people of today, and the potential leaders for tomorrow, as each new generation of able members swarms in. We have an abundance of men and women whose dedication, stability, vision, and special skills make them capable of dealing with every possible service assignment. We have only to seek these folks out and trust them to service. It's very, very interesting. You know our friend Judy from Westminster, Colorado. Yeah. She sent me an article that somebody wrote, somebody that's within the service structure. And what they did is they put together data. They put together publication data. They put together money data, everything in these charts. And you can see Alcoholics Anonymous going off into left field right around 1970. and you can see it by this data. I've got there's a president of our company, Monty, and he said something very interesting to me the other day. He goes, we're talking about something, and he goes, Chris, I never listen to what anybody says. I crunch the data. The data tells the real story. So if you have granular enough data on a business, you can see the points that need work. You can see what's increasing and decreasing in efficiency or profitability. You can really see what's going on. And somebody did this with all the Alcoholics Anonymous stuff, and at the end, their conclusion was basically leadership went out the window in 1970. Everybody dropped the ball. The publication department, everybody.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very interesting article. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying that it's accurate, but it's based on the numbers that are available, from the business offices of Alcoholics Anonymous. So when Bill is saying, there's able-bodied people galore, these people are going to do great, he's talking about 1959.
Sure.
He's not talking about 1970. He was still, not that he was in charge in the 60s, but people were coming to him constantly for advice or direction, or Bill, what do you think about this? We're thinking about doing this. What do you think about this? So his influence lasted right up to about 1970, and there wasn't a succession plan. There wasn't anybody really put in place who was going to do as good of a job as Bill did, and the data, the statistical data proved this out.
Chris, there are people that listen to this, I'm sure, that will balk sometimes at some of the truths that I think you and I uncover when we read some of these things. That would be going, no, wait, hold on. Are you saying that Alcoholics Anonymous just isn't what it used to be? Are you saying it's fallen apart? Are you saying it's watered down? What are you saying? And before we can even answer, they've almost eliminated the fellowship altogether by what they are saying we're saying or not saying, right?
Yeah. Listen, Alcoholics Anonymous is vital and has been vital for 89 years. 3 days ago, it turned 89 years old.
Yeah, Founders Day.
I'm not talking about holistically. I'm talking about the numbers in the publication. The business numbers.
Yeah.
And that's what Bill is talking about here, the business side of AA that 99 out of 100 AAs never even see. The business side of AA started to go into left field.
Yeah, so everybody calm down. It's okay.
Our meetings are still good, right, Monty?
Yeah. Mostly.
Mostly, right. All right. Somewhere in our literature, there is a statement to this effect. Our leaders do not drive by mandate, they lead by example. In effect, we are saying to them, act for us, but don't boss us. A leader in AA service is therefore a man or a woman who can personally put principles, plans, and policies into such dedicated and effective action that the rest of us want to back him up and help him with his job. When a leader power drives us badly, we rebel. But when he too meekly becomes an order taker and he exercises no judgment of his own, well, he really isn't a leader at all. That's a really good description of the balance that we really need in the service structure. Now I'm a big proponent of don't become a GSR, don't become the Grapevine, don't become any of that stuff until you've gone through the 12 steps.
Yes.
Until you've paid the money back, until you have a prayer meditation discipline, until self-searching through inventory becomes a discipline in your life.
Yeah.
Do not do it, because that's where the power drivers come. That's where the meek and mild followers come. You know what I mean? When you've had a recovery experience, then organically you've developed a service ethic, and you are going to be a vital piece of Alcoholics Anonymous. But until you've recovered, you're just going to cause trouble. And in the North Jersey area where I've been paying attention in the service structure for quite a long time, that's the biggest problem. You'll get somebody that just doesn't have a recovery experience. They're driven by ego, and so the quality of the people that can stand to be around them, is very low. And but there are other parts of the country where the balance is good. The people have had a recovery
Mm-hmm.
experience because there's really effective sponsorship, and people have service sponsors, and they're all
Sure.
about it. There can be great conference action that comes from the groups expressing their desires through the mechanisms of Alcoholics Anonymous.
But instead of that, I'm afraid so much of the time we've qualified people for positions of service based on abstinent time, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now you have 6 months, you can do this. Now you have 9 months, you can do that. Until you've had a year, you can't do this. But wait a minute. What if, like Clarence Snyder did, took you through the steps in 3 days? You had a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps. Now you're sponsoring folks, but you can't be a GSR. You haven't been here a year. You know what I mean? It's upside down, is it not? Isn't it backwards?
There was an influence that we're still feeling that has come from the treatment environment, and so much of those recommendations came out of the treatment environment. They did not come from the book Alcoholics
Right.
Anonymous. They came from the treatment environment. Don't get into a relationship in your first year. You can't sponsor until you have 2 years. There was a meeting in our area where you weren't allowed to sponsor in that meeting until you had 5 years. Now that's probably a death sentence for
Yes, it
alcoholics
is.
to wait for 5 years before you really start helping somebody. I mean, listen, you can carry somebody to the message, and that's valid 12-step work, right? But to carry the message to an alcoholic, you need to be taking them through the steps. So again, there's a ton of influence that came in from treatment that we still believe is like AA oral tradition.
Yeah.
And I like to find out, like, okay, where you're saying this, where did that come from? Did it come from serious experience with some of our earlier AAs, or is it something a counselor taught you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to know, because you hear so much. It used to be worse, but you hear so much stuff that's just not AA recommendations.
Right.
you know,
Right.
and maybe they're good. Maybe it's good not to get into a relationship in your first year, but it's not AA.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. You bet.
Good leadership originates plans, policies, and ideas for the improvement of our fellowship and its services. But in new and important matters, it will nevertheless consult widely before taking decisions and actions. Good leadership will also remember that a fine plan or idea can come from anybody, anywhere. Consequently, good leadership will often discard its own cherished plans for others that are better, and it will give credit to the source.
Mm.
Yeah, that's humility. Good leadership never passes the buck. Once assured that it has or can obtain sufficient general backing, it freely takes decisions and puts them into action forthwith, provided, of course, that such actions be within the framework of its defined authority and responsibility. Uh, what he's talking about. Um, he's talking about service structure. I believe in this article, things that the concepts and the service manual lay out for us. But he's presenting it in the grapevine, to
Yeah.
the entire public, so that we can be informed AA members. There's so many uninformed AA members out there, Monty. It's really unbelievable. And it is what it is. There's a lot to be informed about. There's a lot to learn. If you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a lot to learn, and I would like people to know as much as possible if they're voting, in business meetings. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I remember a time, at least in this part of the country, where they would have workshops, and they didn't wait for a service convention. The district or the area would have workshops on what a GSR was, what a delegate was, what a sponsor was. They'd have sponsorship workshops. They'd have workshops on how to start a brand new meeting. I mean, I don't see those anymore.
That's really interesting because that's my experience as well.
Wow.
In the 90s, they were forever having, little, the area or sometimes even the district would put together these little workshops, how to be a GSR or whatever. And I hate to say this, but I see more selfishness and more separation in the people that are coming into Alcoholics Anonymous today. And I think there's many reasons for that. Like when I came in, there was no cell phones. When I came in, there was no computers. When I came in, there was no email. When I came in, there was no podcasts. When I came in, video games were Pong. And so there's a ton of things that keep you by yourself that you get exposed to. And so maybe you lack the comfortability of being in situations with a lot of people. So you kind of stay away from things like how to be a GSR and go become a G. You know what I mean? And I think the drive for something like that today has to come out of a gratitude for being saved from the alcoholic pit, and a organic movement to give back to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A politico is an individual who is forever trying to get the people what they want. A statesman is an individual who can carefully discriminate when and when not to do this. He recognizes that even large majorities, when badly disturbed or uninformed, can, once in a while, be dead wrong. When such an occasional situation arises and something very vital is at stake, it is always the duty of leadership, even when in a small minority, to take a stand against the storm, using its every ability of authority and persuasion to effect a change. So he believed this very strongly, and he put within the concepts and the warranties, he put a minority opinion process. So let's say you take a vote and it's 80 people out of 100 vote to put up a neon sign above your AA clubhouse saying AA today, right?
Right.
Well, there's going to be a process whereby the minority vote gets heard before the decision is finalized. The minority gets a chance to explain why they voted the way they did, and then they hold another vote after the minority expresses their viewpoint. And many times the majority changes their opinion on the wisdom and informed nature of that smaller minority.
I can think of a whole body of people that could use some of this advice. The old red, white, and blue, baby.
God, I'll tell you a quick story. Everyone was asking me to resurrect this meeting. I never mentioned the meeting or the town because it really wouldn't be fair. But it was the Spiritual Awakenings group in Burnsville, New Jersey, and I was hesitant to do this. I had moved away and it had kind of fallen apart, right? So I'm back in town. Everybody's like, "Chris, you got to get this meeting back going. You got to get this meeting back going. You got to get this meeting back going." And I'm uncomfortable with that, right? So I don't want it to be Chris's meeting. So so everybody that's asking me to put it back together, I ask them to be on a steering committee. And what we're going to do is before we even start the meeting, we're going to have a couple of meetings about process, about what are we going to do, and they decide that they want the meeting on a Tuesday night, and there's a meeting 2 blocks away on a Tuesday night.
Uh-oh.
And they said no, you were here first. Yeah, but we closed down and we're restarting. Okay, yes, we there have been 2 meetings in Burnsville on a Tuesday night,
Right.
but we started that original one in the 90s. Okay, and there wasn't any problem. This is a different deal now. 2 blocks away is a Tuesday meeting, so I held a vote. Who wants to have it on Thursday instead of Tuesday, and I got outvoted, like completely outvoted. And so I shared my minority opinion that it really kind of is a tradition break. We're affecting other groups.
Yeah.
We're going to affect another group because we're opening up an AA meeting right across from them. That's going to affect them. That's a break in tradition. And we had another vote. And they outvoted me again, and so I called another minority opinion. I go, look, guys, this is for real. These traditions are put in place for a reason. They're really to protect us too. They're not just to protect the group across the street that would rather die than be in a big book meeting anyway. They're here for a reason. There's deeper reasons than just convenience because you want to have it on a Tuesday. And I got outvoted again. So Monty, the meeting was on a Tuesday, and guess who? Everybody yelled at me. They were trying to pull me out of meetings. This one guy comes up to me, Chris, can I speak to you outside? I'm like, what about? He goes, well, about the Tuesday meeting. And I'm like, do you go to either of those Tuesday meetings? He goes, no. I go, then why would I talk to you about them? You don't
Right.
even go. And he's like, well, there's a lot of people that are upset. That you started it on a Tuesday. I go, I voted against it being on a Tuesday, and he wanted to still give me a hard time. And I go, look, buddy, you got the wrong guy. I voted against it. I was overwhelmingly defeated in my vote. You're talking to the wrong guy. Leave me alone. You're flat harassing me for something that's not my fault. And I knew that was going to happen.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why I was minority opinioning like crazy to not have this thing on a Tuesday. And the meeting didn't last. COVID killed it. And you can say we broke a tradition starting that meeting, and when you do that, it's bad luck. You know what I mean? You can say that, right, Monty?
Yeah. So did the other meeting ever start back up after COVID?
The other meeting is going fine.
There you go. There you go. That's a great story, buddy.
Nothing, however, can be more fatal to leadership than opposition for opposition's sake. It can never be, let's have it our way or no way at all. This sort of opposition is often powered by a visionless pride or a gripe that makes us want to block something or somebody. Then there is the opposition that casts its vote saying, no, we don't like it. No real reasons are ever given. This won't do. When called upon, leadership must always give its reasons, and good ones. Then too, a leader must realize that even very prideful or angry people can sometimes be dead right, when the calm and the more humble are quite mistaken. These points are practical illustrations of the kind of careful discrimination and soul-searching that true leadership must always try to exercise. Another qualification for leadership is give and take. The ability to compromise cheerfully whenever a proper compromise can cause a situation to progress in what appears to be the right direction. Compromise comes hard to us, all or nothing drunks. Nevertheless, we must never lose sight of the fact that progress is nearly always characterized by a series of improving compromises. We cannot, however, compromise always. Now and then it is truly necessary to stick flat-footed to one's conviction about an issue until it is settled. There are situations for keen timing and a most careful discrimination as to which course to take. All right, Monty, I'm starting to understand what this article is about. This article isn't about the leadership in Riverside Avenue in New York City. This is about the groups and maybe the districts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Leadership is often called upon to face heavy and sometimes long continued criticism. This is an acid test. There are always the constructive critics, our friends indeed. We yet never fail to give them a careful hearing. We should be willing to let them modify our opinions or change them completely. Often, too, we shall have to disagree and then stand fast without losing their friendship. Then we have those who we like to call our destructive critics. These they are politicers, and they make accusations. Maybe they are violent, malicious. They pitch gobs of rumors, gossip, and general scuttlebutt to gain their ends. All for the good of AA, of course. Well, in AA at least, we have at last learned that these folks, who may be a trifle sicker than the rest of us, need not be really destructive at all, depending entirely on how we relate ourselves to them. To begin with, we ought to listen very carefully to what they say. Sometimes they are telling the whole truth, at other times a little truth. More often, though, they are just rationalizing themselves into nonsense. If we are within range, the whole truth, the half-truth, or even no truth at all can actually equally hurt us. That is why we have to listen so carefully. If they've got the whole truth or even a little truth, then we'd better thank them and get on with our respective inventories, admitting we were wrong regardless. If it's nonsense, we can ignore them. Or we can lay all the cards on the table and try to persuade them. Failing this, we can be sorry they are too sick to listen, and we can try to forget the whole business. We can think of few better means of self-survey, of developing genuine patience than these usually well-meaning but erratic brother members can afford us. This is always a large order, and we shall sometimes fail to make good on it ourselves. But we must needs keep trying.
Well, I wonder what's going on. This is 1959, April 1959.
Something's happening.
Something's going on to spur him to write this.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, I'm trying to think of what was going on around 1959. I know he was coming out of some of his spiritual experiences that he was, trying to find outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know that there was some disturbance, within the board and how many non-alcoholic and alcoholic trustees there should be. I know there was stuff like that going on. So he's probably speaking from that experience. Now comes that all-important attribute of vision. Vision is, I think, the ability to make good estimates, both for the immediate and for the more distant future. Some might feel this sort of striving to be a sort of heresy because we AAs are constantly telling ourselves one day at a time. But that valued maxim really refers to our emotional lives and means only that we are not to repine over the past nor wishfully fantasy or daydream about the future. Here's where he describes what one day at a time is supposed to be and what it's not supposed to be. Monty?
Hey, Chris, I think your mic's rubbing against your collar.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
So I think I think what he's doing is giving us some guidance on what one day at a time means. One day at a time has been misused so often in the past. I just don't drink today.
Right.
That started early on in Alcoholics Anonymous, probably in the 40s. And that's a complete misuse of what one day at a time is. We quit drinking for good and for all. And if you're somebody who's just not drinking today, but tomorrow would be okay to drink, you've lost sight of what the goal is.
I remember, I'll never forget when Dick B told me that years ago. He said, the literature says we are willing to quit drinking for good and for all. One day at a time is not an AA, at least not the way it's being shared. And even if you look back at the scriptural reference to that in Matthew, do not worry about tomorrow. Today has enough problems of its own. Tomorrow will take care of itself. That's totally different than saying, I'll think about drinking tomorrow. I just won't drink today. That's totally different.
Yeah, he's talking about the same thing as the biblical reference. He's talking
Yeah.
about our emotional, our emotional condition. We're not to, where possible, we're not to suffer emotionally
Sure.
about things.
Yeah.
As individuals and as a fellowship, we shall surely suffer if we cast the whole job of planning for tomorrow into a kind providence. God has endowed us human beings with considerable capability for foresight, and he evidently expects us to use it. Therefore, we must needs distinguish between willful dreaming for a happy tomorrow and today's use of our powers of thoughtful estimate of the kind which we trust will bring future progress rather than unforeseen woe. Vision is therefore the very sense of prudence. A sound virtue is ever there, if there ever there was one. We, of course, shall often miscalculate the future in whole or part, but even so, this will be far better than to refuse to think it at all. The making of estimates has several aspects. We look at the past and present experience to see what we think it means. From this, we derive a tentative idea or policy. Looking first at the nearby future, we ask how our idea or policy might work. Following this estimate, we ask how our policies and ideas might work under several differing conditions that could arise in the longer future. If an idea looks like a good bet, we try it on, always experimentally when that is possible. Somewhat later, we reevaluate the situation and ask whether our estimate is or may soon be working out. I'm thinking that's an amazing paragraph. That's the thought process. That's the predictive thought process. And many of us just do this intuitively. We just, I know I do it at work. When I make a decision at work, almost intuitively,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the ramifications of that change. And he's explaining it out here very, very carefully. It's pretty cool.
Which is totally different than how we used to live. I used to be I'll leap first, and then I'll complain by why I jumped into a pool that had no water in it. You know what I mean?
Ready, shoot, aim.
Yeah.
That was us. At about this stage, we may have to take a critical decision. Maybe we have a policy or a plan that still looks fine and is apparently doing well. Nevertheless, we ought to ponder very carefully what its long time effect will be. Will today's nearby advantages boomerang into large liabilities for tomorrow? Then temptation will always be to seize the nearby benefits and quite forget about the harmful precedents or consequences that we may be setting in motion. These are no fancy theories. We have found that we must use these principles of estimate constantly, especially at world service levels where the stakes are high. In public relations, for example, we must estimate the reaction both of AA groups and the general public, both short-term and long-term. The same thing goes for our literature. Our finances have to be estimated and budgeted. We must think about our service needs as they relate to general economic conditions, group capability, and willingness to contribute. On many such problems, we must very often try to think many months or even years ahead. This was intelligence that he was using in 1959, and it's exactly what the article I started to tell you about showed the lack of in 1970. That's around the time where Living Sober was published. They weren't paying attention to the copyright, so they were going to lose the copyright to the first edition. A lot of real garbage stuff was starting to go on right around then.
So he's real clear here. Now he's kind of saying what he was who he's addressing, right? The world service levels.
Yes,
AA groups, especially world service levels, AA groups and the general public, our literature, finances, service needs, economic conditions. I mean, He's saying it's pretty clear.
Yeah, you could relate this to a current issue. The publication of the plain language Big Book. It's coming at us. I don't
Yeah.
think there's anything we can do to stop it, right?
No.
Maybe the right thing to do is not to stop it. I just don't know. But have the people that made the decision to do this really considered the long-term ramifications of a book that doesn't have the specifics that the book Alcoholics Anonymous has? Have they rushed to gain the amount of money that's going to flow in after publication of this plain language Big Book?
See,
every AA in the world will have it.
I'm going to say
so that's millions of copies.
I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble, but that's okay. Why should today be unlike any other day? I have watched for a long time the flavor of Alcoholics Anonymous, the structure, the meat and potatoes of it all go in the same direction that our country has been going in so many areas. And one of them is, let's deal with how we feel right now so we can feel better in the moment. And we're not going to worry about the future. We're not going to worry about because it is one day at a time, and tomorrow's not here. You know what I mean? I see our government doing that. I see AA doing that, and I'm like, there's so many parallels. I'm not fearful. I'm not scared. I'm not worried, but I'm sad, Chris.
Yeah, it's become a more transactional, more sporadic kind of society today.
Yeah,
very short term. You're really right. He's talking about discernment in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like critical thinking. And he's saying that we're gonna need to do this. We're gonna need to be ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we aced the test.
I don't think
is
so.
all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think if corporately we don't ace the test, then it comes back to the groups again? I mean, my home group, I'm so proud of them. They are back to basics, man. They are just their whole focus is solution. You just, if somebody starts whining about their day, they're asked to stay, don't leave, but we're going to move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the groups are going to have to take up the gauntlet and say, you know what? No, we're not going to do this. We're going to get back to the way it was meant to be. And I think there are groups that are doing that, don't you?
Yeah, I belong to one of them. My home
too.
group is a small Big Book group. It's nothing fancy,
Right.
but we're all like-minded people who want to follow the primary purpose as the primary purpose of our lives.
Amen.
The primary purpose of our lives is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety, and we don't get involved in a lot of crazy
Right.
stuff.
Right.
Now, here's an interesting story. I heard this in the early '90s. They were losing old timers, so you'd look in the meeting and 90% of the people in the meeting had less than 10 years. 80% of the people in the meeting had less than 5. 70% of the people had less than a year. So those were the concerning statistics that Alcoholics Anonymous was seeing back then, and they started to ask questions. Why? Well, where are all the old timers? You cannot tell me they all drank. Where are they?
Right.
And you know what they found out? They found out a large proportion of those people started meetings in their homes with like-minded AAs, because at that period of time, the treatment centers were flooding Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and it was the Wild West. You would just go in there and hear any type and every type of insanity, and no one could control it. It was, I got a right to share. share, and share they would. So what that did was that drove the people out who, probably should have stayed to be good sponsors, but just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I do, exactly.
and to a degree, I understand that. I'm at a point in my life where I do not, I'll go to a beginners meeting, or I'll go somewhere like that to be of service.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm not going to make my home group a group where it's just the Wild West of sharing. I can't take it anymore.
I'm with you, buddy. I'm with you.
All right. So, as a matter of fact, all of AA's 12 traditions were at first questions of estimate and vision for the future. Years ago, we slowly evolved an idea about AA being self-supporting. There had been trouble here and there about outside gifts. Then still more trouble developed. Consequently, we began to devise a policy of no outside gifts. We began to suspect that large sums would tend to make us irresponsible and could divert us from our primary aim. Finally, we saw that for the long pull, outside money could ruin us utterly. At this point, what we had just what had been just an idea or a general policy hardened firmly down into an AA tradition. We saw that we must sacrifice the quick, nearby advantage for long-term safety. We went through the same process on anonymity. A few public breaks had looked good, but finally the vision came that many such breaks could raise havoc among us. So it went. First a gleam in the eye, then an experimental policy, then a firm policy, and finally a deep conviction, a vision for tomorrow. Such is our process of estimating the future. Our responsible world leadership must especially and consistently proficient in this vital activity. There is an ability much to be desired, especially among our trustees, and I think most of them should be chosen on the basis that they have already proved their aptness for foresight in business or professional careers. We shall continually need many of these same attributes in as far as they can be held among our leaders of AA services at all levels. The principles of leadership will be just about the same, no matter what the size of the operation. This discussion on leadership may look at first glance like an attempt to stake out a specifically privileged and superior type of AA member, but this is not really so. We are simply recognizing that our talents vary greatly. The conductor of an orchestra is not necessarily good at finance or foresight, and it is even less likely that a fine banker could be much of a musical success. When, therefore, we talk about AA leadership, we only declare that we ought to select that leadership on the basis of obtaining the best talent we can find, making sure that we land that talent wherever it is in the spot where it will do us the most good. He is setting Alcoholics Anonymous up for the future. I'm going to go back to that 1970. What happened?
Yeah.
The last couple of years he was so sick. He really couldn't do a whole lot, with his emphysema and everything. But the succession plan wasn't there. The mentoring wasn't there for the people that really needed to passionately and discernedly make decisions at the higher levels of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's pretty apparent,
Mm-hmm.
While this article was first thought of in connection with our World Service leadership, it is quite possible that many of its suggestions can be useful to everyone who takes an active part in our society. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Nowhere could this be more true than in the area of 12-step work itself, something at which nearly all of us most eagerly work. Every sponsor is necessarily a leader. The stakes are huge. A human life and usually the happiness of a whole family hangs in the balance. What the sponsor does and says, how well he estimates the reactions of his prospects, how well he times and makes his presentation, how well he handles criticism, how well he leads his prospect on by personal spiritual example, well, these attributes of leadership can make all the difference, often the difference between life and death.
Wow.
So yes, our quality of sponsorship, Monty, can mean the difference between life and death for the people we're working with. Bill says it plain right here.
Wow, that's convicting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank God that Alcoholics Anonymous is blessed with so much leadership in each and all of its great affairs. And that's the end of that article, Monty.
It makes me think. It makes me think that we ought, those of us who have had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, who are people that are saying yes to being sponsors, or we're making the approach to people, we really need to count the cost. I think every prospective sponsor, before he's ever sponsored for the first time, needs to memorize that paragraph.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Nowhere.
That should be in the pamphlet on sponsorship.
Yes.
If there is a pamphlet on sponsorship. Yeah.
Nowhere.
I know there is. There's a pamphlet on everything.
So he sums this whole thing up by saying, nowhere could this be more true than in the area of 12-step work itself. Wow.
Yeah, be smart.
Yeah.
Be smart about what you do and what you say. I come from a period of time where sponsors were just trained to say, you're too stupid to do a 4-step. Take the cotton out of your ears and shove it in your mouth.
Right.
Shut up and listen.
Right. Yeah.
How do you do a 4-step? You do a 4-step with a pencil. That's really where I got sober. Somehow I survived, Monty. I can't tell you why.
Gosh. I've heard that stuff too, man. Oh my goodness. In fact, I remember there was a guy at Old Codger that when they started, when cassette tapes started becoming a thing, right? And those taping organizations and all the controversy. Well, they're not actually AA, they're a private company. All that stuff went on, right?
Yeah.
But it was like, wait a minute. You can't, somebody who's blind, deaf, and dumb can't work a 4-step because they have to be able to write. I'm like, what? If they're blind and they don't know how to write, they can't write. They got to put pen to paper. They got to be able to do that. I'm like, oh, please, somebody needs to pull the bottle out of your mouth because you're still drinking.
That's like pulling the black off the paper.
Oh, gee willikers.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, you can't listen to a speaker tape. You're sick. Get out of the bed and get to the meeting. No, stay in the bed, get well, and listen to the tape. Don't listen to that guy. Gee, oh man, I could just go on. Yeah.
Thank God for recovery media. My life was saved by it.
My
life was saved by it.
Yeah. Right on. All right, my friend. Another great show. Thank you, everyone who's been tuning in. People that are using these broadcasts in the meetings, after the meetings, and all that stuff. It does our heart well. We really believe that this stuff is getting out to some people, and it's just like walking through the big book. It's been years, and people are still listening to that thing. So God is good. We are but His humble servants, and God, keep us that way, please. So I so appreciate you there, my friend. We'll see you next week, all right?
God bless you, Monty.
All right. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man along with Chris S. and the rest of the Take 12 Recovery Radio family, and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.